The next morning, Wang woke up in terrible pain. Every part of her body hurt, and tears started flowing down her cheek. She thought to herself, if I don't get out of here, he'll kill me. She tried to get out of the bed, but as soon as she moved, a dark voice stopped her in her tracks. Where do you think you're going? He stepped towards her, his eyes locked on hers. I ask you a question. Where do you think you are going? Wine tried to think of an excuse. I just wanted some air. Jungkook laughed coldly. Do you think I'm stupid? You think you can just walk out of here after everything? Tears filled her eyes. Please, I don't want any trouble. I just want to go home. Jungkook's expression turned serious. Jungkook, where would you go? Do you even have a home? She realized his right and stayed silent. Jungkook softened a bit but still looked stern. You're not going anywhere until your wounds heal and I'll arrange a place for you. Wine looked at him confused and crying. Why does he care? Why he's shouting for mercy? But before she could form a response, he walked over and sat on the bed beside her, making her heart beat even faster. Then he reached out and touched her face. She flinched. His fingers, surprisingly gentle, traced the wound to the corner of her lips. She closed her eyes, too scared to face him. Her breath. I'm sorry for this, he whispered, his finger lingering on her skin. I know you're very scared of me after what about happened last night, and I promise I'll make up it to you. She asked, her eyes shut until he finally took his hand away. When she opened them, she saw a different Jungkook, his eyes usually so cold. He smiled softly and stood up. Calling out to someone, he said, Mrs. Yon, please help our guest to have a shower and then ask what she would like for breakfast. Whatever she wants, make sure she gets it, okay? Mrs. Yon nodded obediently and Jungkook turned to leave, biting mere casual. She watched him go, utterly confused and unable to comprehend his sudden shift in his behavior. She stared at him, speechless and confused. His actions and words contradicted the ruthless man from the night before. As she left the room, she was left in a whirlwind of emotion, trying to reconcile the two sides of Jungkook, the cold, ruthless mafia boss, and the caring, almost tender man who had just shown her an as soon as Jungkook stepped outside the room, a smirk crept across his lip. He was never this caring towards anyone except his wife. This was all part of his plan to get the truth out of the girl. He realized her wouldn't make her talk, so he decided to try a different approach. The same strategy. In the hallway, Jungkook encouraged Namjoon, who gave him a questioning look. What's with the sudden kindness? Namjoon asked, his voice low. Jungkook smirked even. You think I care about her? No, this is just a different game. She won't break under pain, so I'm trying to softer approach. It's just the same trick I used on Hana. Jungkook sat and made his way to his office. As soon as he closed the door behind him, he leaned back against it, his smoke widening, but then he heard a knock. It's Namjoon. Come in. Jungkook said and sat leaning against the table. Namjoon came in. Jungkook, we need to talk. Namjoon said, his tone serious. Jungkook crossed his arm, his smirk fading slightly. What is it now, Namjoon? Namjoon stepped closer, his voice lowering. That girl, she's innocent. She's really possessed by Hana's spirit. You saw the footage of the orphanage. There's no other explanation. Jungkook's expression hardened. I don't believe in that supernatural crap, Namjoon. There is always a logical explanation. People use fear to manipulate and control. This girl is no different. Namjoon shook his head, frustration evident. Jungkook, I am serious. What if you are wrong? What if Hana's spirit is really controlling her? We need to be careful. Jungkook walked to his desk, picking up a small object and toying with it absently. I have dealt with enough betrayal and manipulation to know better. Hana was ruthless, but she was just a person. Spirits cause their just stories to escape you. Namjoon stepped in front of Jungkook, blocking his path. And what if those stories are true this time? What if this girl is just a pawn in Hana's twisted game from beyond the grave? We can't ignore the possibility. Jungkook made Namjoon's gaze, his eyes cold. I don't have time for fairy tales, Namjoon. I'll get the truth out of her one way or another. She is connected to Hana, and through her, I'll find a way to bring down anyone who stands in my way. Namjoon sighed, knowing it was useless to argue further. Just don't let your need for revenge cloud your judgment. There's more at stake here than just your. Jungkook's jaw tightened and he turned away. Leave it, Namjoon. I know what am I doing. With that, Namjoon reluctantly left face, casting one last worried glance at Jungkook. Alone, Jungkook leaned against his desk, his thought a turbulent mix of anger and determination. Spirits or not, he muttered to himself, I'll get to bottom of this. 1 year ago, the tension between Jungkook and Hana, the Mafia queen, had reached a boiling point. Determined to end the feud and express her remorse for the death of Jungkook's wife, Hana decided to visit his mansion. She was ready to make a pact, offering half of her empire to Jungkook to ensure peace and prevent further mistakes. As Hana entered the grand mansion, flanked by 10 of her men, she steeled herself for the confrontation. However, the sight that greeted her was not what she had expected. Instead of finding Jungkook in the morning, she saw him lounging on a luxurious sofa, a drink in hand, with two moans draped across his thighs. Jungkook, Hana called out, her voice laced with a mix of shock and disdain. Jungkook looked up, his eyes slightly glazed from the alcohol, but sharp enough to catch the surprise of Hana's face. Well, if it isn't the queen herself, he drawled a smoke playing on his lips. To what do I owe the pleasure? Hana's expression hardened as she took in the scene. I came here to discuss a truth, to express my regret for what happened to our wife. I am prepared to offer you half of my empire. Jungkook's smirk widened as he took a sip of his drink. Regret? Truth? You think offering me half of your empire will make up for what you did? He chuckled darkly. You, Hana, I should thank you. Hana's eyes widened in confusion. Thank me? Jungkook pushed the woman off his lap and stood up, walking slowly towards her. Thank you for getting that out of my life, he said coldly. I was so bored of her. Hana was taken aback. Jungkook leaning closer, his voice dripping with venom. I am saying that you did me a favor. I didn't have the guts to get rid of her myself, but you took care of that for me. Hana's resolve wavered as she saw the twisted satisfaction in his eyes. Save it, Jungkook interrupted, stepping back and taking another sip of his drink. You came here thinking I would be broken, but I am far from it. This isn't about making peace, this is about power, and I won't stop until I have taken everything from you. Hana took a step back, a smoke played on her lips. This isn't over then. Oh, I know, Jungkook replied with a cold smile. It's just a beginning. As Hana and her entourage exited the mansion, a heavy silence settled over the room. Jungkook's smirk faded, placed by a mask of cold calculation. One of the women who had been stirring with him, emboldened by her earlier demeanor, leaned in close and whispered in his ear, shall we continue? Jungkook's expression darkened instantly. In a swift motion, he threw the wine glass he had been holding across the room, the sound of shattering glass echoing through the space. Grabbing the woman by her hair, he yanked her close, his eyes burning with fury. Don't you dare! He snarled, his voice low and dangerous. This was my wife's right and hers alone. Do whatever you are told, nothing more. Now get out of here. Terrified, both women scrambled to grab their things and hurriedly left the room. Jungkook watched them go, his expression a mix of anger and sorrow. As the door closed behind them, he slumped back onto the sofa, execution and pain evident in his posture. Jungkook sat in a dim light, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotion. He loved his wife more than anything, and her was a wound that would never heal. Despite his earlier facade, he had never been bored of her. Every moment without her felt like a void. His heart ached with the loss and his anger burned hotter. But he knew that seeking revenge against Hana would not be simple. Her power and influence made her nearly untouchable. To defeat her, he would need to get close to earn her trust. For days, Jungkook stayed under the radar, not interfering with any of the Mafia's main operations. This unusual behavior. One day, after a meeting concluded and everyone was filing out, Hana smirked. What happened? You haven't been around much lately, she taunted. Have you forgotten your purpose? Let me remind you, you once aimed to sit on the throne where the Mafia queen now reigns. Jungkook turned to face her, matching her smirk with one of his own. I don't forget, Hana, but I have realized that defeating you is nearly impossible. Hana's smirk widened. She stood up and walked towards him, her eyes gleaming with a mix of amusement and menace. It's good that you understand that now. Her expression darkened as she grabbed him by his tie, pulling him close and looking directly into his eyes. Many have come and gone, but anyone who eyed this throne ended up destroyed. She leaves his eyes smoting down his coat with a mocking smile. I guess you have learned your lesson. You will not mess with the Mafia Queen. As she turned to leave, Jungkook suddenly pulled her back by the waist, bringing her close. The smirk on his face was now laced with something darker. Let go of me, Hana demanded, her voice icy. She had never let any man get this close, and no one had ever dared to touch her in this way. Jungkook's grip tightened slightly. Defeating you is hard, but winning you over is the easiest thing. What do you mean? She asked, her confusion evident. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let her go and stepped back, stuffing his hand in his pockets. Rumor has it the Mafia Queen is looking for strong jeans to style her hair. If you ever need help, just let me know, he said, winking before walking out of the room, leaving her stunned. Hana stood there momentarily at the loss of four words. The audacity of Jungkook's suggestion both intrigued and unsettled her. She had never found a man who matched her power and personality. No one had ever dared to touch her. But as she aged, the thought of an heir had begun to weigh on her mind. She wanted a strong man to share her bed with just once to ensure her legacy. Jungkook, she called out, stopping him in his tracks again. Her voice was softer, almost contemplative. He turned slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. Dead serious. Think about it, Hana. You need someone strong, and I need an opportunity. It's a win win. She watched him leave, her mind racing. At 32, she had never let anyone close to her, but the encounter lingered in her mind, making her ponder to future of her reign and possibilities Jungkook had just opened up. As the day passed, Hana couldn't shake the thought of Jungkook's proposal. The idea of having a child who would carry on her legacy was appealing, and Jungkook's confidence made her wonder if he might be the perfect candidate. But she knew better than to trust so easily. The game they were playing was dangerous, and every move had to be calculated. Day passed, and then the call came. Jungkook was summoned to the Mafia Queen mansion. As he entered, he clenched his fist, controlling the surge of emotion. This was the place where they had taken his wine, the place where they had. But he masked his anger with a smile as he turned to face Hana when she called him. Sit, Jungkook, Hana said, her tone commanding, as she sat with her legs crossed on the other side of the room. Jungkook compiled, taking a seat opposite her. He could sense that this meeting was significant and he was ready for whatever she had planned. Hana leaned back, studying him with a critical eye. You want to sit on my throne, don't you? She began. You can, but there are conditions. You have to marry me. You will get to sit on it when I'm pregnant, when the Mafia Queen needs red. Jungkook's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly composed himself. His mind raced as he understood the gravity of her words. So basically, you want a servant in the name of a husband, someone to do your bidding while you are unavailable? Jungkook replied, chuckling as he saw through her screen. Hana smirked, appreciating his quick wit. You are not as dumb as I thought. It's good to know my hero will have your influence as well. Jungkook maintained his composure, his expression revealing nothing of his true feelings. So do you agree? Hana continued. If you do drink this water, this rivalry will turn into a relationship. If not, then leave without even drinking a drop for the Mafia Queen's mention. Because it's not cheap enough for enemies to drink. She handed him a glass of water, her face darkening as she issued the challenge. Hana spread her arms on the sofa, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. We're getting married next week. Jungkook leaned back, a smirk of response forming. Agreed. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Both knew this union was a strategic move, each playing their own game. For Jungkook, it was a step closer to his ultimate revenge. For Hana, it was a way to secure her legacy. The dance between them was far from over, and she stakes were higher than. The day of Jungkook and the Mafia Queen wedding was the most shocking in the underworld. No one could believe that the Mafia Queen had married. And even more surprising, she married her rival. However, away from the public eye, Mafia Queen Hana was in Jungkook's room at his mansion. Jungkook had made his first strategic move by sending all of Hana's men back to her mansion, ensuring their first night would be without any disturbances. When Jungkook entered the room, he saw Hana standing by the window looking out into the night, Are you nervous? He asked, his voice soft yet teasing. Hana turned to him, her face composed, maintaining her Mafia queen aura. Nervous? Of course not, she replied, though there was a slight tremor in her voice that betrayed her. Jungkook smirked, walking closer to her. You don't have to hide it from me, he whispered, his finger gently tracing her jawline. It's your first time, isn't it? Hana's eyes flickered with defiance and vulnerability, but she held her ground. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, he said softly, his gaze locking with hers. It's understanding. Hana remained silent, her breath itching slightly as Jungkook's touch moved to her neck, sending shiver down her spine. He leaned in, his lips barely brushing hers, a whisper of a kiss that made her heart race. I promise, he murmured against her lips, tonight will be special. Hana's resolve wavered as she found herself leaning into his touch. I don't need promises, she whispered back, her voice shaky. Jungkook smiled gently, his eyes warm. Then let me show you, he said, his hands moving to her waist, pulling her closer. Tender kiss, Hana's initial stiffness melted away as Jungkook deepened, his hand exploring her back. She responded, her arms wrapping around his neck, pulling him closer. Jungkook lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to the bed. He laid her down gently, his eyes never leaving hers. You are beautiful, he whispered, his fingers trailing down her cheek. Hana's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never felt so vulnerable, yet so desired. Jungkook, he started, but he silenced her with another kiss, more passionate this time. Let me take care of you, he said, his hands moving to her waist and pulling her closer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silk blindfold. Jungkook, trust me, he said, trying it around her eyes. Hana tensed. What are you doing? She asked, a mix of curiosity and apprehension in her voice. Shh, Jungkook whispered, lifting her from the bed into his arms. He carried her out of the room and down a hallway. She heard a faint echoes of their footsteps in the empty corridor. When they stopped, Jungkook set her down gently on what felt like a chair. Stay still, he whispered before kissing her deeply, passionately. She could feel the intensity in his kiss and her body responded in kind. When he pulled away, he began to undress her, his hands slow and deliberate. She felt the cool air on her skin and shivered slightly. Jungkook, she asked, her voice uncertain. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved behind her, his hands on her shoulder. Welcome to hell, Hana, he said, his voice low and menacing. A hell that's darker and more painful than anything you have ever known. Hana's breath hitched. What are you talking about? She demanded, trying to remove the blindfold. Jungkook caught her wrist, stopping her. You will see, he said, his voice devoid of the warmth it had held earlier. He stepped back as she heard the sound of his belt being removed. He then moved her blindfold. Hana blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim light of the empty room. She saw only a single chair in the center and the cold, hard floor beneath her feet. Confusion and fear filled her eyes as she looked at Jungkook, who was now standing in front of her, his belt hanging loosely. What is this? She asked, her voice cold. Jungkook's expression was cold and unyielding. This, he said, his voice like ice, is where your real nightmare begins. Jungkook kept the Mafia queen Hana in a room for an entire week. To the outside world, it seems like they were simply enjoying their wedding days. No one had any idea of the torment happening inside. During that week, the mansion remained early quiet. The staff and the guards were instructed not to disturb the newlyweds, assuming they were relishing their honeymoon. However, the reality was far more sinister. Jungkook was exacting his revenge, making Hana suffer for everything she has done. On the seventh day, shocking news spread throughout the underworld. The Mafia queen is whisper filled the air, and though everyone knew who was responsible, no one dared to voice it loud. Many secretly rejoiced, relieved to see the end of her ruthless reign. Jungkook stepped out of the mansion, now the uncontested leader of the. His rise to power was immediate and unchallenged. With Hana gone, there was no one left to oppose him. Jungkook's transformation was complete. From grieving husband seeking vengeance, he had become the Mafia king. His path to power forced through pain, and the underworld watched in silence, knowing that the new era had begun with the reign of King Jungkook. The story hasn't finished